Federal Training Center in Charlottesville tonight has a new owner.
The Charlottesville City School system has been selected to acquire the Federal Executive Institute, beating out one of its main competitors, the University of Virginia. Kate Nectarline joined us live in studio with what this means for students and the city.
Steve and Aaron, the news broke today about Charlottesville Schools being given the multi-million-dollar property, snapping alternate plans being pitched by the University of Virginia. Now the work begins to transform the property from teaching senior government officials to little kids.
One transaction can transform an entire school division, and it's not just about what happens at FEI, it's about the entire division gets to be reimagined.
One big win for the city for free, at least for now. The Federal Executive Institute, shuttered by the Trump administration in February, is now in the hands of Charlottesville Schools. Royal Gurley is the district superintendent.
This moment is bittersweet because as a result of people losing their jobs, this happened. And so I truly hate that part of it. Because there were people who had worked there for many years.
Now he says the property off Route 29 has a new purpose, early learning. This comes after efforts from the University of Virginia to scoop it up themselves. In a statement sent to 29 News, UVA spokesperson Bethany Glover says, "We respect the department's decision and celebrate the opportunities this acquisition will afford the school system and community."
They actually were very supportive from the beginning. We learned that we could not submit a joint application. And so after that point, we just weren't aware that they were still submitting an application, which is perfectly fine. There wasn't a back and forth.
I'll say that the university has a place in any and everything that we always consider. So we're looking forward to having further conversations with them as well.
Sam Sanders is Charlottesville city manager. He says the $30 million previously set aside for a preschool center will now be used to rebuild the institute while still preserving some of its historic character.
We have to do some additional planning. This was a very quick process. There's some work to be done.
Charlottesville plans to use that property primarily for preschool classrooms and also for administrative offices. They say this will help free up space for the expansion of the division's alternative education programming. Live in the studio, Kate Nectarline, 29 News at 6.